What is up, crew? This is Shinker Financial back, and today we're going to be talking about, is it possible to beat the S&P 500? If you follow this channel, you know that the S&P 500 is my favorite index to invest in, my favorite thing to invest in, bar none. Especially if you're an early stage investor and just don't have much capital to invest in other things, such as property, whatever that is. It is the best and the safest thing to do with a proven track record. But for the investor who wants to go above and beyond and actually beat the S&P 500, is that even a thing to strive for? Like, is it possible, or is it just a waste of time? In this video, we're going to be talking about all those things and just, what you can kind of think about if you're trying to beat the S&P 500. Well, first things first, we got to give the stats, and that is 80 to 90% of mutual funds, so actively managed funds. So let's say your friend has a financial advisor, or you have a financial advisor. It's probably getting outperformed by the S&P 500. There's only about 10 to 20% of financial advisors in mutual funds that are actually beating the S&P 500 index funds. So, for example, if the S&P 500 returned 20%, they're probably doing lower than that, which is crazy. And it's just not really talked about among financial professionals because they want your money. So when you hear that, you're like, what? Why don't I just put all my money in the S&P 500 then that I have to invest and just kind of coast? And that is perfectly fine. If that's what you want to do, that is awesome. I literally encourage so many people to do that. Even Warren Buffett himself has had a famous quote saying, if he were to give advice to the average person, it'd be to just put all their investments into the S&P 500 and never look at it again. Now people are really seeing that come to life, especially with the past quarters, past years the S&P 500 has produced are absolutely astonishing. It has been the best quarter and best years in a long time. But what a lot of professional investors have been saying now is that it seems almost too inflated. It seems as if it is so high right now and it's just balling so much that it is actually kind of overvalued for what it should be at this time. And I do agree with that in some sense. However, I don't think the average investor needs to care about any of that. I think it's really just a buy and hold mentality you have to have. And let's say in the next 5 years, oh no, it doesn't return 20% a year like it has been doing. Who cares? You're not really aiming for 20% over time. You're aiming for what it has produced in the past over time, which is 8 to 10. So don't get caught up in the whole S&P 500 is overvalued and you need to be investing here and here and here. Unless you are a professional or someone who's just kind of really learning, the game of investing, so to speak, and you're like, okay, I want to try a new strategy with, let's say, you haven't done it before, 5 to 10% of your money, and you're like, okay, I could see that the SP is a little bit overvalued right now. What can I do, to kind of really balance it out? And is there any stocks, especially big, great companies that are kind of undervalued right now, which is rare because most of these big, awesome companies are in the S&P. But I would be lying to you if I said it was not possible to beat the S&P. There's a reason why there's some just absolute dogs like Bill Ackman and Warren Buffett who do know enough, who can actually track and beat the S&P just time after time again. And I think they have somewhere about 10% more than what the S&P does over time, which is a lot. If you're doing 20 and the S&P is doing 10, you are doubling and quadrupling your money way faster than if you just had it in the S&P. But it's very, very risky, and you have to be a pro to do it. So my recommendation for the average investor is, yes, it's possible to beat the S&P 500, but don't even try to. Unless you're going to play around and you're really interested in all this stuff, like tracking companies' financial ratios, looking at their balance sheets, looking at their future forecasts, and just financial acquisitions, investment, stuff like that. If you're not a nerd like me or someone else, not saying that I beat the S&P 500, chill out. But if you're not a nerd in general about this stuff, then don't really try, okay? It's just not worth it. But if you are a nerd, there are certain things you can look at, and you just have to be really careful and to not over trusting your mental prowess on the forecasting of a lot of these companies. So I recommend, if you want to try, just 5-10% of your money, make a system that's prioritized around undervalued, really good companies who have low debt and looks like they're going in the right direction in the future. Those are the big things. I have a lot of videos talking about other rules and more on picking stocks. And some of these rules in my past have really worked out, where I've seen like 300% in a year. But then other ones I picked using the same rules are down 50. So you gotta be aware of, even if you pick a great stock that is undervalued, it could go down even more the next year, and you will just get crushed if you put all your money into it. But then you do have the winners that make like 300% in a year. So these things are important to know, and I recommend someone who is trying to beat the S&P, go for undervalued, really good stocks with low PE ratios, typically 15 to 25, also with a great CEO and a proven track record. An example of those is how recently, I think in the past 3-4 weeks, Meta was pretty undervalued. That's an insane company, and if it's at like a 16-17 PE ratio, then something's up. It's probably going to jump right back up in a couple years or so. And that's what happened. In a month, it literally jumped up, I think, I don't know the exact percentage, but I think it was like 5-10, I don't know. But those are things you should be looking for if you're really trying to beat the S&P. Also, these really good investors, again, like Bill Ackman, Warren Buffett, they're very buy and hold strategy based, and it's not as if they have 100 to 200 different companies in their portfolio. They're picking like 5 to 10 and just really buying and holding and betting on them. But the reason they have so much confidence is because the companies are so proven and good and will readjust over time. So that is what you really want to be paying attention to if you're trying to beat the S&P 500. However, to close it all out, S&P 500 is really the best way to go for every single investor out there if you're not really into the nitpicky of how to evaluate companies. So there you have it. Yes, you can beat the S&P 500, but you kind of have like a 10% to 5% chance to do that, and even lower if you have no idea what you're doing. So if you're like me or like anyone else, why not just don't even try, and the bulk of your stuff, really put it there if that's the way you want to go with your finances. So this is Shinker Financial, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you have a great day.